welcome, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. The theme for this roundtable session is basically crypto assets and traditional finance, how the financial industry is preparing for MiCAR. I think I can start with you. How do you think the financial services sector has, first of all, received this regulation, and how far do you think they've prepared?
So good morning, everybody. So I'm from the French bank Société Générale, so I'm representing the banking industry. I think that the MiCAR regulation is a very good news and was very well received by the banking industry and all the traditional actors that want to be involved in this new ecosystem. Now, shortly focusing on the French ecosystem, France is one of the few countries that have a full-fledged approval regime prior to MiCAR. We have first a compulsory registration, and there are 94 actors that are registered today. 26% are foreign, 7 banks, and an optional agreement, which means that you have to fulfill more requirements than the AML, the anti-money laundering requirements, and the counter-financing terrorism measures. And why am I saying that? Because Société Générale, the French bank, through its subsidiary SG Forge, which is a fully owned subsidiary, is the first entity to have been granted such a full-fledged approval. This is really a good way to prepare for MiCAR, because this French approval is 90% copy-paste of the future MiCAR agreement, and it is also a competitive advantage.
All right. Thank you very much. Since we're still on that, I would like to move to Diederik. You're the Payments, Digital Finance and Innovation Sector, or the World Savings and Retail Banking Institute, or the European Savings and Retail Banking Group. We're talking crypto regulation, and we're talking traditional finance. Compliance is such a huge issue with traditional finance. How well do you think the sector is preparing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, you mentioned, I'm here speaking notably on the capacity of ESBG, which is an association of European retail and savings banks, notably, but the WSBR part is, we are celebrating our 100th anniversary next year.
Okay.
So we have a long tradition, indeed, of being a licensed institution, selling products to the market, complying with all kinds of regulation. And when it comes to crypto, I have to disappoint Max a little bit. The banks are not really eager or not offering it at the stage,
exactly.
But obviously are exploring the options and testing the water. And to that end, of course, we welcome the fact that MiCAR brings clarity to the market. It has provisions about consumer protection, stipulation on compliance, what to do and what to not. The concerns we have a little bit on looking at the current legislative package and the level 1 and the level 2 legislation is that there's still lots of issues to be solved. We see a bit of diverging views between the ESAs, the European Supervisory Authorities. It seems that the EBA is going sometimes to the left, while the ESMA is going to the right. Whilst the level 1 mandate stipulates, no, you should stick to the middle. So a lot of fish still to be fried, we believe. And that also holds us a little bit back in, or at least our members holds a little bit back in taking decision on what to offer or not. We are used to offer investment products like securities and comply fully with MiFID, which is an existing directive at European level for traditional products. Here we create something completely new. We understand the rationale for that. But on the other hand, we see some challenges for banks who want to move from, let's say, a MiFID compliance to MiCAR compliance, because it requires more efforts than you would expect at first sight.
Okay, I'd like to also take it from the law perspective. Christo, that's your field. Do you think there are any highlighted risks involved in here? If you can just maybe even give us one major risk.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yes, I think one of the biggest risks about this is that I think this is the moment where the market is being tested. Everyone is anxious to find out how well the market players are going to come through the MiCAR authorization. Perhaps the traditional financial market players are testing the waters a little bit, but really it's a bit of a test on how many players will survive, whether they will make it on the other side, because the background is very different when you normally have a financial institution that goes after a license. There are people behind it who know what it's like to run a regulated entity, whereas we are now in an area of a completely new world where the technological knowledge is perhaps more important, and how to bring these two together will be interesting. So, yeah, the biggest risk is the actually establishing the trust that MiCAR is trying to achieve, I think.
Okay. Now, obviously, when you're talking about one of the salient parts of crypto that a lot of people enjoyed was the fact that they could kind of hide a little bit. But when you're talking about regulation, you're talking about transparency. And transparency and the crypto sector have not necessarily been friends. So now that this regulation is here, I'll throw this to Magnus. What type of effect do you think this would have? And again, another risk in this area that the traditional sector should probably look out for.
Well, I would say I disagree a little bit about your quote around that, because in the crypto sector there has been transparency. Everyone relates it to the FTX case, which is a totally different setup and a structure compared to it. If you look into the current setup of the serious actors out there, the exchanges who's running this one in a serious way, like CoinsPaid and others, they are transparent. It's like when we are also there assisting them, and we see ordinary compliance officers comes in from the ordinary banking world. They go in there on the first day of work, and they see all the tools that are there, and they are looking like, why didn't I have this in my other job in the bank? So there's clearly a level of transparency, and as said, the serious actors has already adjusted to that years ago, so that will not change much. But it will change in terms of that you will be obliged to follow even more, call it stricter rules in terms of the whole setup around it, so you can also then call it diversify out a little bit of the not that serious actors in some matter.
Okay. So this one, anyone can sort of respond to this one. Is there any anticipated disruption or new innovation that might pop up with regards to MiCAR and that the industry is preparing for? Like an innovation or a disruption, something that might change the industry, the traditional industry, and in a way that might be so different, totally different from what we already see.
So maybe from a traditional bank standpoint, under the MiCAR regulation, all the players will be obliged to report the carbon footprint of their transactions. And it's going to be very interesting to see the different setups, frameworks that will be created to meet that objective.
Okay. Anyone else want to?
Yeah, from a retail savings bank point of view, the banks that are considering doing something with crypto are just considering offering it as an additional package product in their portfolio of investment products and what have you. And from that point of view, it's of course good that these new platforms are being regulated. And possible innovation might that maybe there will be some new crypto exchanges that in reciprocity can offer traditional shares or investment products, and personal view is that here, and that might be a possible new competitor for banks who offer the normal mutual funds and what have you. That could be a possible disruptive side effect of having these new licensed entities. But if I may come back to your previous question about this compliance aspect, what we see also, we see similar developments in payments, for example, where we had fintechs who were engaging in payments initiation and account aggregation, who after that suddenly became licensed entity, which then also became from very small fintech firms with developers and tech guys and people in nice buildings like this. But after being licensed, it didn't just meant that there was this model where we were stamped, but it meant like, and I was joking, Max was joking about, next door the building is still under construction, but be expected that that building will be needed soon, full of compliance staff who doesn't do anything else than comply with the rules and can't engage in developing new products, features and services. So from that point of view, I would say welcome to the world of licensed entities.
Magnus?
Yeah, no, I would say it will drive an innovation of total new banking products in itself, because there's a non-well hidden secret that there are quite large players out there today facilitating, preparing all over the world, including in Norway, where I come from, but also like we see public of whatever JP Morgan, Barclays, and all of these players are actually doing right now in the market. So clearly, I think we will see a shift in terms of also they will offer platforms at different levels, but also custodian services, etc. So I think we will see there emerge, like we discussed at the event here yesterday, of where you will have to have, the traditional crypto actors out there who can facilitate with product and services, because the banks, de facto, they are not ready per se yet to handle it. So we have to have the mix of it, but you have to call it, ironically, I would say maybe, to grow the crypto landscape, you actually need decentralized actors to build trust for the average person out there with their brand name, with their reputation, to ensure security, to have insurance, to have the traditional setup in place of a safe haven around it. And on the back-end infrastructure, there's then room for the crypto companies to come in with their specified products. And I think we'll also see emerge where we'll see more of DeFi elements coming in. Not that DeFi is coming over in terms of the protocols per se that is out there today, but more of the mechanisms around DeFi. And that's why we say, we believe that the mechanisms of DeFi is the future of finance, but we still need, call it traditional finance people, to get in there to do the coding, to set up the mechanisms, to put it in place. And to just take one example that we also discussed yesterday here, is that if you just look into the Norwegian Central Bank test project on the e-krona, there in phase 4, the latest phase now, they used actually an open source code of the DeFi protocol Aave to calculate the interest. As the first one in the world, Norway tested calculating interest rate on the CBDC, and they took the code that Aave uses, amended it slightly, copy-paste straight in, because it's math. So I think we will see these kind of examples coming more and more into practice, where we will see the mechanisms and the dynamics of being able to program assets in different kind of ways that we are currently seeing today.
Okay. Krista?
Yes, I think I would also add that perhaps the life-changing, world-changing ideas that we may have seen come across our table, but which are perhaps stuck behind this glass ceiling a little bit, because the entities that have the resource, that have the capabilities, they just don't have the trust today. But yeah, perhaps MiCAR will help it all come together, and then some great cooperation could come from this. Yeah.
Speaking of cooperation, how do you think the financial or the traditional financial sector is cooperating with other institutions to ensure that their traditional customers would feel a bit more confident about the traditional sector sort of embracing MiCAR and the crypto sector?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that traditional financial market players might feel that there is some competition in some areas, so perhaps they wouldn't be that open immediately.
Okay.
But at the same time,
competition with
with
collaborators.
With the client base, but really, I think these two worlds are going to complement each other, and I think MiCAR will help really sort of fragment the market a bit better, to show where the cusps under MiCAR will actually fit into, that they're going to complement the traditional finance rather than compete with it. Okay. But we are yet to see.
But again, I can add to that.
Of course.
I think where MiCAR will not come in and per se help or assist for the banks, that's down to this landscape is not fully developed. Okay. It's not like we have four corners and we know everything that is going on within this landscape. It's being developed as is now, as we are sitting here. When we go out, there might be a new product. And this is also something that the banks needs to take into consideration, even though we have, call it, a framework around it on how to, call it, handle different types of it. We still need classification, and you need the competence in terms of traditional interpretation of money laundering, of the KYC element, who are you dealing with, what are they doing, what are the products, what are the service offerings, and that MiCAR will not per se help you with in terms of the extensive development that will happen also. So that's also a part where clearly the traditional financial actors needs to wake up and build competence, allocate resources, otherwise it will be quite an expensive ride to have consultants sitting there 24/7. We're happy to do so, but that's not what we want to spend our resources on. We want to do it in a totally different way, and that's also why I think it's important for banks now and financial actors within the ecosystem to actually wake up and build the competence, because if you are to be in this market, it's not like you can read a book from 2017 and now we're ready to go. You need to have someone who has the pulse on the market 24/7 of what is happening if you are to deal with this one in a safe and compliant way. Otherwise, you can also outsource, to third party, like you said, and diversify the risk. So there's two ways to go here also. But if you want to do it yourself, you actually need to allocate resources and understand it, and don't just hope for a tool that you can press a button and apparently there's a report coming up with a green or yellow flag. That's unfortunately not how this landscape is.
All right, Genevieve?
I think that some traditional banking players are willing to engage with this new ecosystem that was built by non-regulated entities. And this is why MiCAR, which is fully inspired by traditional financial regulation, it's not new for banks. And MiCAR is very important because it brings trust, reinsurance between players, level playing field context. And we believe that traditional banks can make the link between traditional finance and DeFi, provided that there are those banking standards, banking grade standards applied to this new ecosystem. And already today we can interact with for example, DeFi. The group subsidiary Société Générale Forge made a transaction with MiCAR DAO, a refinancing of a covered bond held by Société Générale, which was refinanced through MiCAR DAO Vault in DAI. So it is possible, provided that you apply legal standard frameworks and banking grade standards.
And I would also go a little bit also looking beyond MiCAR. I think in the first wave, if banks, traditional banks, as Genevieve mentioned, start to adopt crypto products, they will do that in a capacity as distributors of the product to the public. And in order to be able to do that, there's not only education required to the public, but also to the bank staff. And here we have to be a bit careful. Banks already used to distribute mutual funds or other investment products, but we have also to understand what's in it for banks. And it is not a secret that, for example, if a bank sells a mutual fund to a consumer, it receives a kind of a provision, a kickback fee from the distributor, which then financing the whole advising model. And there's only one market in the Netherlands where this kickback does not exist, which is the Netherlands. And unfortunately, the European Commission has also proposed a retail investment strategy, which maybe is something worth looking at from a crypto point of view as well. But there the Commission is testing the water with the idea of a ban on inducements, as they call it, which prohibits the provisions or the kickback fees, which then means that if banks want to give investment advice to a consumer, the consumer will have to pay for that particular advice. It's probably not as a surprise that we as a banking association, at least for savings and retail banks, are against this ban on inducements, because it raises the barrier for the consumer to go to a bank or an advisor to ask, okay, should they invest here or put more money there and whatever. So I think it's also maybe good to understand a little bit thinking forward on how the whole business model for the distribution and what's in it for all the actors to understand. To keep that in mind as well.
Okay. Let's dial it back just a little bit, and just to look at it traditionally. The traditional banking sector has not necessarily been a sector that has always been open to change that quickly and embracing it. You always, they take their time. So, so far, how has, on a large scale, from your perspective, how has the reception of MiCAR been for the traditional banking sector? Honestly, let's be
representing
clear.
the traditional banking sector,
Okay,
and
yes.
almost 100 years old. We of course, legislation is always late in following the developments. The crypto providers already popped up like mushrooms well ahead of the legislation. So we're actively engaging with the regulators, of course, in the run-up of the drafting of the legislative process, and we also feeding back at least into some of the level 2 pieces of legislation. But again, 100 years of business, we know what our consumers want to expect, the customer structures. We will, I would say, and maybe it's not the answer you want to hear, but we take a quite modest approach. I would say it's rather testing the water and see, okay, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for the consumers before the banks really start to engage? But we keep a watching brief. The fact that we're here and also engaging with the regulators shows that at least we're not ignoring the existence of MiCAR and the providers behind it.
Okay. How about we hear from the non-traditional banking representatives?
Yeah, no, we work quite close together with these actors, so we have some experience to say it in that matter, and also for working with them on crypto since 2015. And what will come into place is rather that we have to look into the facts and address it, that we are at a very, very, very early stage already. So it's not like just because of MiCAR we turn on a switch and tomorrow everyone is going to use crypto. Because none of the banks, even though they are preparing different platforms, preparing different services, it's not like they're just going full throttle and we will go ahead and everyone will only use crypto. It's more like now is the insurance part that has been lacking for the C-level group at the bank, because they have been saying, hey, can we deal with this? Can we handle this space? And I say, yes, we have rules here. We have current existing rules. We have laws that fits into place. Then, but is it a core regulation? Is it actually legal? Is it legal from the EU perspective? That's what's been lacking. So all the banks has been now just sitting still, waiting for the board level to be able to sign off, sort of saying, let's go ahead, let's make products. But that doesn't mean they will do it front and at the start. I believe they will more do it on the back end side, where we as consumers don't see and feel what is being done as settlement. So I think that's the way that they will slowly introduce it in different kind of ways. Like, as I said, being a custodian for different services, that's the perfect test case. Be a little bit careful, but then being able to, offer platforms and services, most likely via third parties, to diversify risk as a start. But MiCAR again is the driver to just start this journey, I would say.
All right, Genevieve?
I think that the banking sector has been adopting a prudent stand towards crypto assets because they are just regulated entities, and our regulators are kind of reluctant to let the banking sector take a direct position on crypto assets on their balance sheet. We mentioned earlier on the different risks that are inherent to this new ecosystem. Obviously, financial security, compliance risk, but also the cybersecurity risk, which is enhanced, which has always been a top priority of banks, but which is even enhanced by the digital value chain of the crypto asset world. Reputation risk, obviously, as regulated entities, we have to take into account negative news. Yeah. And then, so those are already existing risks that we are that the banking sector is used to address, to tackle, but there are also new risks linked to the technology itself, the DLT technology. Let's mention the use of public blockchain versus permissioned blockchain. So in the European context, we are lucky because the regulators are agnostic towards the kind of technology, as long as the regulated entities fully comply with the regulation. It's a bit different in the US, where regulators and banks are are less prone to use public blockchains, and also a last risk inherent to the technology is the non-reversibility of the transaction. The banks are used to be able to reverse the transaction. This is not the case on the DLT, so we need 4 to 6 eyes validation before sending the transaction of the digital assets. So we have to take into account those enhanced and new risks.
Yeah, I would add to it's basically the never-ending balancing act between the business decision and the risk management, and banks as the very top of the regulated entities, they know all about it. So it does seem like all the banks are trying to find out what this regulation means, what it actually does. We had this webinar at the beginning of October, and we did see some representatives from the banks attending, which was a very positive indicator for us. But yes, I think to add up to everything that has been said, they won't be rushing into these decisions because they really need to understand all perspectives, all the risks that will be involved. But they definitely are not blind to the possibilities that can open up.
Okay. All right. So when I was doing my research, I was trying to find out if there was any, any financial actor in the traditional sector that was maybe actively pushing against MiCAR, or not necessarily against, but taking a stance of maybe we will not, get involved in this for now. Let's see how it's working for others before. If there is, first of all, are there any traditional banks that have sort of taken that position that you might know of? If yes, if any bank takes this position, what do you think that would mean for them and their clients?
I would rather say they don't have any choice, and that's down to that right now any bank can say no to any crypto clients because they don't have the competence, and then you are allowed by normally in all civilized countries by the existing financial regulatory framework to say no, we're not dealing with it in that kind of way. But when you get sort of a joint structure onto it, and like if you take the example of Norway, where Norwegian banks, they are saying, hey, we can touch crypto assets that comes from Norwegian crypto exchanges because the criminal police has said in the security report that it's a medium risk there for Norwegian exchanges because per se they don't have a lot of foreign customers. Okay. But if you come in with a foreign exchange, they say it's a high risk. So immediately they just say, if you come in from anything else than Norway, high risk, we're not touching it. Okay. And in this kind of way, when Norway is also a member of the EA and we will adapt these rules quite swiftly, and thereby if it comes then an EU exchange that is registered by MiCAR per se, then it's down to the classification of, for a period, the bank can actually say, we don't want to touch it because we don't have the competence, but then you will come up to a fine line of in breach of the EU EA rules in terms of free flow of capital, etc. So you will end up at the place, I think, not necessarily by tomorrow and overnight, but you need to adapt to this one quite swiftly in terms of just handling the ordinary receiving funds that origins from crypto assets in that kind of way. So I would say no bank should ignore this matter at all. It's rather try to learn and adapt towards it as soon as possible so you can actually handle the risk and not just blindly have to accept maybe something.
And adding to that, Anita, I'm not aware of any bank that's against it. That doesn't mean that every bank is going to accept it. Again, my constitution is more traditional banks. So I think they take a bit more wait-and-see approach. And it will also depend a bit on how the public is going to take it. If there's huge demand, and banks see out of a sudden that, for example, clients are going away to other banks that offer these services, that they might reconsider their position. At the end of the day, banks are there also to make a living themselves. They have to take commercial decisions and have to decide on what products to offer and what not. I think it's at this point in time too early to judge. If we see it taking up, suddenly I think it won't take long before all banks are going to offer it. But at the moment it's on a voluntary base, in contrast to other products that banks have to offer. For example, Digio, we don't have a choice. We're not asking party for that, but that's another discussion.
But we don't know if that will be a token-based standard. No. Most likely it will not.
No, but that's not the core of this conference. No. Let's move on.
Yeah. No, I think I have to agree because it's just a waiting game, and I can't say that I am aware of any bank who's completely against this. I think that it's a world of business. You need to keep yourself in touch with the market. So yeah, but nothing much.
Thank you very much, Genevieve.
I fully agree with what was said. I think this is a new ecosystem which is being built, which is being regulated. So I believe that the banking sector has no choice but to see what is coming.
Okay, thank you very much. So now you get the opportunity to ask our panelists some questions. So does anyone have a question? There's a microphone back there. Kindly bring it forward for me.
It's okay.
Just give us a quick second. Right. In front here. Right here. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Madis. I write crypto and blockchain news for crypto.de in Estonian. So you mentioned mostly how MiCAR is affecting institutional players, like mostly banks. But can you briefly say how MiCAR mostly impacts the regular, everyday user, let's say the retail investor?
Who would like to respond to that?
I can maybe start off. Basically, the whole idea of MiCAR is to introduce the protection, that the framework in which, I don't know, your complaints are handled. Most importantly, that the assets will have to be segregated, that some of the dramatic collapses that we have seen in the news couldn't happen because the CASPs just cannot use customer funds on their own account. Different rights that can be seen as similar to the traditional financial world. So it revolves all around protecting the retail customer as a first point, really.
Any other question?
Any other question, please?
I can add to that also that it will affect in a way that, like you say, if you are on the private side or a retail side or whatever, it will affect also the influencer side in terms of now you cannot just say whatever you would like to. It's like you have to handle it like it's a financial instrument. You can just throw out the hype around it, you can be held legally responsible for it. So that's also something that applies for the banks in terms of the advice they might give in it. It's for us that we're covered as it as a consultant advisor, but also a private individual who runs media like you in terms of how do you call it a market manipulation of writing a good about a certain token or not. That's also an element that should be taken into consideration and might also help the average consumer out there in terms of not having lots of noise out there of influencers, whatnot, who is just talking, call it straight out, lots of bullshit around different tokens and creating attention where you have no other clue on how to sort of deal with it, but you just trust the source. But now if you can hold the source available and responsible, then it's a totally different game. So I think that also will help the consumers in general to clear the serious products from the non-so serious.
Okay.
In general speaking, if there's no other question adding to that, I think there's a general trend, not only for crypto, but for all financial products, that financial education is a key and should be first and foremost applied by all actors in the industry. I think a clear explanation of all kind of products, what are the risks involved, what are the benefits, what are the possible pitfalls, is a key obligation upon all of us. And on top of that, indeed, monitoring or regulating these finfluencers, I think is also a quite important step, because especially those that are not well financially educated might really fall into the pitfall of get rich overnight type of scams, which at the end of the day creates mistrust, not only in the crypto but in the whole financial industry at all.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question or okay, kindly go ahead.
Rido was ready.
You're in a straight line.
I have a question regarding MiCA and PSD2 directive and PSD3 and PSR directive projects that are in the EU at the moment. How do you think MiCA would change the payment industry, especially in the framework of PSD2 that would be applicable if PSR3 will not include crypto as a means of payment?
To my knowledge, there is no plan to include crypto in the definition of funds, which is the essential precondition for payment services. So it seems like the intention of MiCA is to keep them separate for now. Of course, it is possible to have them merged. Some matters can be open for interpretation, but you can have your separate crypto transfer service, which are simply referred to in MiCA as having similarities to payment services. So for now, it seems like they are being kept separate.
But I think we should see it in the perspective. I agree with that totally. Yeah. But I think we should see it in the perspective that what is actually MiCA covering per se right now. And that's just three, call it classified types of tokens that they have put it into e-money, art, and others in terms of utility. So in terms of also I understand the underlying question here is also the complexity when we add towards everything that starts with a D, with DeFi, DAOs, dApps, whatever, in that structure, and also get, call it a more clearer picture towards the NFT element and how you are connecting actually all the mechanisms that we are talking about. That is not fully covered right now because we don't know yet what is fully decentralized. So thereby, I think over time, we will and should be preparing for also MiCA 2 coming up, which the work has already started on. In some matter, it will take some years naturally, but that's when I think you will see the link and the synergies between your question and not right now as it is.
Yep. Or it will be PSR 2 as well,
yeah.
Together with MiCA 2.
Yeah.
But indeed, I agree. It's currently not envisioned in the payment package. That the crypto are being used for payments at large.
Okay. And then
Raido
Saar, Estonian Web Series Chamber. I'm just curious, why do you think it's possible to lobby in banking, in commercial banks, that maybe there is possibility of segregation of risks for commercial banks to serve crypto entities? For example, if local law says that you have to keep your customers' funds in credit institution, so this is basically just holding funds is low-risk activity. And for example, we in our company, Swapin, where I used to work earlier, then we used the Estonian Swedbank only just for paying salaries and taxes. All activities what may concern risks and actually, of course, contain risk like on-ramp and off-ramp from crypto to fiat and vice versa. This is risky activity, and of course, I understand that at least Estonian banks, okay, let's say Scandinavian banks in Estonia say clear no for that. But from your perspective, is it possible, this segregation of risk that, for example, crypto companies are served only limited way that okay, you can hold, you can use your account only for this or this or this, but don't step into on or off ramp?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can start in some matter, and I think that is possible. Like I briefly mentioned, if you also use the element of third parties to diversify your risk in that ecosystem. So it's all how you set up a structure in terms of whether or not that's on your pure own responsibility, risk, and account of dealing with it, like you say today, because then you will easily say no immediately. But you can easily also, on the other side, set up a third party structure with a separate legal entity and a vehicle that runs by itself, so it's out of risk of the traditional banking activity that you run. And that's what we see as you know, the example of the Danish neobank Lunar, how they have done it. In the wrap, you can go straight in and buy top 5 cryptos. And that's not like you can go in and add your own cryptos to that wallet. It's a third party that holds the wallet. So you just say, hey, I want to buy for 1,332 Danish crowns Bitcoin. Then they have an agreement with the third party, who again has an agreement with 3 exchanges. They take the best price in, you buy. You sit still, and if you want to sell, you cannot transfer the crypto out to yourself. You can just then say, hey, now it's 8,405 Danish crowns. I want to sell. Then you receive your fiat money, and that's handled through the third-party system. So the bank never touches the on-off ramp in so matter. So that's one part. But back to what you were saying in terms of if you're having an operational account, that's something different, where you can also use other third parties for that matter of sake, like Fireblocks and anything else, who is technically the custodian for you, so we can at least minimize the risk in some matter. But still, you need to be sure of the compliance part. So if you blindly just trust the third party, that's one thing. But if you want to, understand and ensure as an AML officer and compliance officer, you should maybe then not just blindly trust, with all respect, these third parties. They're good and nice, but for your own security matter and your own sign-off, I would at least like to have the competence and have some checkups, and not only trust third parties, because that will hold you responsible in the end if there's something that happens anyway.
Okay. Anyone wants to add something, or that?
No, I think indeed that's the most prudent model going forward. So more using the third party as a custodian or whatever, rather than having the crypto interfering in your own balance sheet as banks.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's all time will allow for this roundtable session. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to let you know that we've had 4 speakers here. As you can see, we had Diederik Brugink, the head of department, Payments, Digital Finance and Innovation, World Savings and Retail Banking Institute, European Savings and Retail Banking Group. Thank you very much for joining us, Diederik. Genevieve Duhet, Christo Assets Program Director, Global Transaction and Payment Services at Societe Generale. Krista Severev as an associate at Sorainen Law Firm. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, Magnus Jones, the Nordic Blockchain and Innovation Lead at EY Tax and Law. Once again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And that's it for this roundtable session. We're going to go for a quick break for about 15 minutes. As I mentioned earlier, we will have a hybrid session. That's the second and the third session. So kindly be back in here on time so we can start on time. Thank you very much and see you soon.